Hi, welcome back to another video in this lesson 10. So this video tutorial will focus on the concept of overloading and overriding. We will understand the meaning and the understanding in programming language of these two terminologies, overloading and overriding. As well as we will be discussing these two concepts in the context of constructors and functions. Now, if you are a student or any programmer that is facing difficulty with the constructors, the constructor overloading in the C++ or any other language, as well as functions in functions overloading or overriding in C++ or any other language, or studying object-oriented programming, specifically inheritance, this video is very useful for you. It will clear your doubts, in my opinion, about the concept of function overloading, overriding, also constructors, and its use, its purpose in inheritance or any programming context. Okay, so specifically we will be focusing on object-oriented programming, but the meaning will remain the same for overloading and for overriding terminologies. So let's start with the constructor. First of all, let's have a look. Let's create a constructor, a simple constructor. For example, we have a constructor and we will write some text in it that will be like, I am a parent constructor. I am a parent, but just a parent is enough to understand. Okay. And what we are going to do now, that we will create an object. So let's create an object like parent p1. So what will happen, that whenever we create an object, a constructor is called automatically. So this is a default constructor with no arguments, and we have a text I am a parent that shows that a constructor is called here. Now let's have a look and see what happens if we have a constructor in our derived class as well. Now, first of all, I'll just create a derived d1. Okay, and I'll comment this. What will happen then if we created an object of the derived class, and the derived class is derived from this parent class, it will call its default constructor in its object. How? Let's run this program. Now, as you guys can see that I'm getting a text output, I am a parent, but I don't have anything, any code in my derived class, plus I'm not even declaring the object of my derived class. This statement is commented. So how it's working? It's working on the concept that whenever we create an object of a derived class, an empty constructor or a default constructor for its base class is called automatically. So this is the concept. This is the basic and simple concept. Now, if I have a derived class constructor, an empty constructor, and I'll print a message in it. So I'll have derived, I'll have cout and write I am derived. Okay, and endl. Now, what will happen? It will first call this constructor, and after that it will call its own default constructor. Let's call it. So as you guys can see that first the I am a parent is printed, and then I am a derived is printed. Okay. So this is how the constructors work. Now let's talk about constructors with parameters. Now let's have some quantity, like let's say I have integer a, and I have a parameterized constructor within my parent element, parent class. So I'll write integer a, and I'll write that a is equals to a. Okay, just using this underscore just to differentiate between a member a and a parameterized a. Okay, and we will have a curl bracket. Okay, and I'll have some text in this. Okay, I'll write I am parent 2. Okay, just to differentiate between those two constructor. Okay, now we have a difference between those two constructors. All right, so let's call this program. Let's run this program. As expected, that I am a parent, which means just a default constructor is called. Now you might have a doubt that, let's say, with an empty constructor of derived class, an empty constructor was called, which is a default constructor. But what about if I have a member variable? Let's say I have integer c in my derived class, and I want to initialize the value to c with the help of a constructor. So I'll write derived integer c, and I'll write c is equals to c and curl bracket, and within curl bracket we will write a different text just to differentiate between these two constructors and see the behavior. Okay, so I am derived 2. Now what's going to happen if I pass an argument? Let's say I pass 2 over here. So what will happen? The constructor with a parameter will be called, and also the default constructor will be called instead of this parameterized constructor. Let's run this program. Okay, so we have some error over here. Oh, sorry, R is missing. Now it's correct. Let's run this code again. All right, so as you guys can see that instead of calling I am parent 2, it's calling I am parent. So what behavior it shows? It shows the behavior that whatever constructor we called, if it is a default constructor or if it is a parameterized constructor, what will happen? That the parent constructor will always be called whenever we create a derived class object. So we created the derived class object with a parameter. The constructor with parameter in the derived class was called, but also the default constructor of the parent class was called before the derived class constructor. Got the idea? Let's move forward. Now, let's say I have two elements, okay, two member variable. Let's say I have integer d as well, okay. And now what I want, that I want such constructor derived integer c and integer d. And I'll say c is equals to c and d is equals to d, and we will have a text by saying I am derived 3. Okay, just to differentiate. Now I am going to tell you about the concept of overloading. Okay, so this is I am derived 3. Now what is going to happen? If I pass one argument, I am passing one argument, the compiler will call this constructor, okay, by itself, because it is receiving an argument only one, and this is only one argument. Now let's say if I pass two arguments, let's say I pass derived div2, we pass 3 and 4. Now what will happen, that the compiler will automatically call this constructor. Instead of giving you an error that there is only one parameter, it will automatically call that constructor which has two parameters. So let's run this code. I'll just remove this output. So as you guys can see, for the first object created, the constructor with only one parameter was called I am derived 2, and with the second declaration I am derived 3 constructor was called, which had two parameters. Now this is the concept of overloading. Overloading. Okay. So what actually overloading means, that when the parameters are different, okay, parameters are different, number of parameters or the type of parameters. Okay, so this is a must condition for overloading a function or a constructor. So the concept of overloading is basically applicable and decided on the basis of parameters in case of constructors, and in case of functions it also decided on the basis of parameters. Okay. And this is the working procedure of constructors in case of derived classes. First, it calls the default constructor of the parent class. Now, let's say you have a situation where you have some member variables like A, and you want to call this A, this constructor in your derived class as well. So what is the situation? What is the syntax for that? So what you are going to do, you are going to write that explicitly over here. How you are going to do that? You will write that parent, okay, parent, and you will receive another variable, let's say A, and you will pass A, okay, and this is it. Understood? And over here it will be also incremented by one more parameter, and we will include this same thing over here. So copy, and we will paste it over here, and we will write the comma sign. And after that, what we are going to do, we are going to write 2 3 and 4 3 4. Maybe we'll write 5. Now let's run our code. Okay, so as you guys can see that I am parent 2 is now calling. Why? Because I am parent 2 is not a default constructor. It is a parameterized constructor. Now we have designed a situation where we are calling a parameterized constructor in derived class, plus we have also called the parameterized constructor of our parent class. Got the idea? Before this, there was no parent class. So if I remove this parent from here and this argument from here, and also reduce this by 1 as well, and if I run this program, you will see that if we haven't defined, if we haven't write the constructor, the parameterized constructor explicitly, the program will call the default constructor, which is I am parent. And as you guys can see that in this case I am parent has been called. So I'll just reduce the size of this code. Okay, so as you guys can see in the first code here, in case of only one parameter, I have got no default constructor, no parameterized constructor called. So that's why it's only calling I am parent as well as I am derived to. Now in case of 3 parameters, what I am doing, I am calling the parameterized constructor of my parent class. So instead of calling I am parent, it is calling I am parent 2, which is the text of the constructor, the parameterized constructor. So this means that parameterized constructor was called and A was assigned some value with the help of these arguments. Now let's talk about the concept of overriding. So overriding is basically changing the functionality of a certain function. Constructors are also special type of function, so it also falls into the category of a function, but it is called by itself automatically. Whenever the object is created, it depends on the nature of the object created. Either it is empty object or with parameterized, okay? So it depends on that, but it is a special kind of function. So we can say that whenever you are able to change the functionality of a function, that is called the function overriding. How? Let's achieve it in our inheritance. For example, if I have a parent class with a function called print, okay, so I'll call this as a void print function. Now this is the name print, or let's say let's give it a function xyz function, which means any function, okay? Now this is the function name. Inside of function I will call this as a I am the xyz of a parent class, okay? I am the xyz of a parent class. Now in my main function, whenever I create first of all I'll create an object and I'll call d1 dot xyz function, because it is inheritance. So all the functionalities of my parent class have been inherited and have been included in my derived class. And here is one mistake, that it should not be here, instead it should be in my parent class, okay? Okay, now let's record this again. I'm sorry for the mistake. Okay, dot, and as you guys can see, it is still showing. So I'll run this and I'll run the code. Okay, I'll remove this output and run this code. As you guys can see, I am a parent, I am derived. So this shows that default constructors are called. So already this topic has been discussed again and again in this similar video. So I'll just remove these things because it will just create confusions. Okay, I'll just remove these things and we will just focus on functions only now. Okay, now let's run our code. And as you guys can see, it is saying I am the xyz of parent class. Now this means that whatever functionality was in this xyz function, that has been inherited as it is in my derived class. Now what I want that I want to have the same function name void, and I have xyz function, and instead of writing I am xyz of parent class, I will write I am xyz of a derived class. Now what will happen? Let's run the code. So as you guys can see what it's saying I am xyz of derived class. So what technically happened? We have overridden the function. We have the same function name but different functionality. I have the same function name like xyz function, the same function name in my parent class xyz function, but the functionality of both are different now. One is printing parent class and another is printing derived class, and the compiler knows automatically which function to call in this situation. So it technically calls the function that is associated with the object of the class that we are working. So right now we were working with the d1, which is the object of the derived class, and whenever we call the d1.xyz function, it called the overridden function in our main function. Now what you want in a situation, you want to have the functionality of the parent class as well as the functionality of your derived class. In simple words, you want to customize the functionality. This is also overriding function because you want to have the previous behavior as well as the new behavior. So how do you do that? If you want to have that function before your code, so what you will write? You will write parent and double colon scope resolution, and you will write xyz function. Now what will happen if it calls xyz function? Both functions will be called. So as you guys can see, I am the xyz of parent class and I am xyz of derived class. So this demonstration shows the concept of function overriding, that how with the same name, with the same return data type, with the same number of parameters, we can have different functionality. We can also import the functionality of our parent class in our derived class, as well as we can modify the functionality of parent class in our derived class according to our requirement. So this was the concept of overriding and as well as overloading. So in summary, overloading, overloading, overloading is associated with this concept. Number of parameters must be different, and type of parameters must be different. So any of those two will give you the concept of overloading. And overriding is basically the concept overriding is basically the concept in which in which in which you what you do, that you create another function with the same name, but the functionality of both the functions are different, okay, in the derived classes. So I hope you guys got the basic idea of the syntax and working of the overriding, overloading constructors, as well as our functions. And you guys might be thinking why I didn't discuss overriding in case of constructors, because constructors cannot be overriding directly. Okay, so in case of constructors, just remember that overloading concept and the syntax for how to do it and how you can achieve it and how it is called. And for overriding purpose, you must have the idea of overriding and overriding like functionality of. So instead of writing this text, you will write something different. You can also return the data from it. If you are using integer, you can write a variable here, d is equals to parent whatever it is. Okay, so you can do that as well. I hope you guys have learned something from this tutorial about the function overloading and overriding. In the upcoming two videos, we are going to solve one practice problem in each video, within which we will show the concept of inheritance as well as these overloading and overriding things. Okay, so do watch those videos must, okay, just to get your hands-on experience on these concepts and get much more mature in these concepts. So I'll meet you guys in the next video.